Hey everybody, Pat Benage here, the evolution coach, creator of the 6-week shift, the inner path, and author of this inspirational blog, SoulTalk. And finally getting kind of settled in here and just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Big change, 1,300-mile trip southward, and enjoying the beautiful area. Enduring the heat, adjusting to the altitude. But it's a great place, and really feel like it's just a perfect location at this point. Who knows what the future holds, but really looking forward to exploring and kind of finding my place in this beautiful country. So this morning, and I do apologize. I still haven't gotten out the video from last week, but it should. I'm going to get that all uploaded, and so you're welcome to kind of go back and review the video from last week if you'd like. It'll be up. And today, what I want to talk about, and actually it's going to be something I'm going to talk about for at least a couple, 3 weeks, I think, because it's a big topic, and it's something that's been coming through for me in my daily contemplations. That's just I think it's important for us to have those who are on a path toward truth to be aware of this and to have at least a basic understanding of what lies ahead. And there's a group that I've been a part of for several years in Central Oregon, which meets on Tuesdays and discusses a variety of topics. But several weeks ago, we were talking about enlightenment and sort of what that means, and what just a variety of things that came out around that. And I can't remember all the things that were said regarding that, but since that time, it's been a theme in some of my contemplations, several of my contemplations, in the mornings, and in the last few, it's actually come through pretty clearly. That, and I've said this actually before. If you look back on one of my older blogs, one of my older soul talks, if you look back, I did talk about enlightenment as not being the goal, and it's become much more clear to me that enlightenment is not. It's not our goal. It's not what we're after here. Now, some people are. Some people view that as sort of the ultimate attainment in human consciousness. And I would say that in human consciousness, that's probably the case. It would be enlightenment, I think, is it's akin to cosmic consciousness. So first of all, if I want to talk about what is enlightenment. And everybody has a little bit different idea. Like I said, we had our discussion several weeks ago. There were a lot of ideas that came out about it. But the best definition that I've found is that enlightenment is essentially the same as cosmic consciousness. That it's a merging of the human consciousness with the universal consciousness, the universal mind power. So the human mind at all of its levels, merges with the universal mind. And so when you accomplish that, when you reach that stage, then you have reached enlightenment. But what exactly is enlightenment? What does that mean? And what's come through for me is that enlightenment is that tapping into knowledge, tapping into this universal knowledge, which is light. Light is, in terms of spiritual definition, light is knowledge. Light is, when you're illuminated, you see more clearly those, what is true in this physical realm. So you see how things line up. You see how connections are made. You see all of the interconnectivity of life. And so what happens is we mistake that as humans. We mistake that for something greater. We mistake that for a soul consciousness. We mistake that universal mind power, that cosmic consciousness, for source. We view it from the human perspective as if that's the source. That's, the divine source of all. And it's not. It's not. There's more. There's something beyond that. So what is it that's beyond enlightenment? That's been a question that's come through here for me, is what is it that's beyond enlightenment? Because we get, and there are various stages of enlightenment. That's one of the things that came through in the discussion we had. And you can be enlightened in a variety of areas, and it gives you an expertise to a certain degree in those areas where you're enlightened. But it's just knowledge. It's just an awareness, a knowing at a certain level that is clear, that where there's clarity. That, when you break down enlightenment, when it's enlightened, it's illuminated. It's when there's light, you can see more clearly. It erases the shadowy areas, and it, not in terms of, like the positive, negative kind of shadowy area, but it clarifies things so that you can see all of it more clearly. But it's still only pertaining to what is in the physical realm. It's not really, there's some spiritual aspect to it, but it's not really the spiritual realm, because the spiritual realm is beyond this enlightenment. The spiritual realm is creating the light that illuminates these things that we tap into, but there's something underneath, and I've talked about this before. It's the shabda, which is the sound, the vibration that is beyond light, that creates light, that is that divine source. And enlightenment, like I said, it shows up in a variety of ways. And we look at people and we say, this person's enlightened because they have certain abilities. They can see things more clearly in some areas, or maybe they, have what would appear to be special powers. They're things that everyone is capable of, but you see people that walk on hot coals, or lay on beds of nails, or survive tremendous things without a scratch, and they seem almost supernatural. And it's because they've tapped into a certain area and they become enlightened about this particular area of existence, of the human experience, and they've mastered that. But it's a seductive trap, in that psychic abilities, a lot of this is psychic in nature, and so these psychic abilities, they are a piece of that enlightenment. It's a person that's become enlightened about a certain aspect of life, and they've tapped into that, and they've begun to master that and really be able to utilize that. But you get sucked into that. You can be very easily drawn into those things as well, and trapped, kind of trapped into this idea of enlightenment. And I know this because I've been there. I've been there myself. I've been at that point where I was beginning to feel enlightened because I had this ability, which I still do, to tap into a level of knowing that was beyond anything that I had personally experienced. I didn't have evidence that things were true. I'm sure you've all had these experiences. I talk to many people who do, who they just have this knowing when something is true or not for them. And that's a certain degree of enlightenment. And in my case, I began to have this ability to recognize and tap into truths that were, if somebody asked me the question, or posed an issue or a problem, I could tap into this cosmic consciousness in order to answer that question. And there wasn't any reason that me, Pat Benage, would be able to know the answer. And yet just posing the question would allow me to tap into that in a way that I could answer it in a way that was valid and pertinent to that individual asking the question. And it wasn't coming from my opinion, it was coming from something higher, something deeper. And it's real easy to mistake that sort of enlightened perspective for soul's perspective, when in fact it is that universal mind, that which you could call even divine mind, what in my teaching is called Nij Manas, which is the original mind, And but that's something that was created for using in this physical universe. And there's something beyond that. So enlightenment, it's a step on the ladder, but it's not the goal. It's not the goal. The goal is realization. The goal is realization. And I've talked about this many, 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 many times about self-realization. Actually, there's three main stages of realization. That's self-realization, spiritual realization, and then God realization. And each of those is well beyond enlightenment. Enlightenment deals with information, it deals with knowledge. But it's not the source of that knowledge. It deals with an understanding at a very significant level, but it doesn't deal with absolute truth. And I know a lot of you probably going, Pat, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And that's okay. It's okay. And there's nothing wrong with pursuing enlightenment. There's nothing wrong with any of it. I'm not making a judgment about that. I'm just talking from my own experience that as I pursued that and felt like I was tapping into that cosmic consciousness, that I had this experience of tapping into information that I, from a experiential standpoint, I shouldn't have had access to that. And so it seemed like something else. It was illuminating, it was enlightening, and it's certainly a much higher level than just being in the human consciousness. But it's what I discovered in that process is that it didn't transfer to life in every way. It didn't transform my whole life. It certainly helped. It certainly gave me the ability to see a lot of things more clearly and tap into answers more easily. But realization wipes away the obstacles. The obstacles, everything that is here is no longer an obstacle when you've realized your true nature. And I have to say up front, I'm not there yet. I have moments, but I'm not there. I'm still working toward that, but I'm at a point where I recognize that realization is something beyond enlightenment. Realization is beyond cosmic consciousness, universal mind. And it is the goal. It's soul realizing its own true nature. But don't mistake that cosmic consciousness for soul, because that's not it. It's not it. So I'm going to expand on this and talk about different aspects of this over the next few weeks, and I hope you'll join me, and I hope if you have some other comments or other perspectives or other ideas, please, make the comments. I don't claim to be infallible in this, but it is how I see things. It is my experience, and I welcome comments, and I hope that if it's something that's meaningful to you, that you'll share your own perspective and share this message with others, because I think it's important. I think it's important to take a look at what is true and what is not. And that's always been my pursuit. That's always been my goal, is truth, absolute truth. And so thanks again for joining me. And as always, continue to live your life from the inside out. See you next week.